Navigating Construction During COVID-19, a case study in how team culture influenced project outcomes. As Megan indicated, my name is Sean Klinkner, and I'm the Healthcare Market Sector Leader for DCPM. And I'd like to introduce my team members today who are going to be doing most of the talking during our panel discussion. So if you could raise your hands, team, when I call you out, that would be great. I'd like to start by introducing Darren Kaisner and Justin Anderson from Anderson Construction. And we also have Malcolm Brown and Kurt Chiusolo from ZGF Architects. We have John Herboth from Northwest Engineering Services, and Kathy Kraus, my colleague at DCPM. So before we get started on our panel discussion, I wanted to ask Kurt if you could give us an overview so our audience has a little bit of context on the project we're going to be talking about today. So Kurt, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Absolutely. Megan, it seems that the share screen option has been disabled.
Sorry, let me see if I can fix that for you. Okay, is that working?
Yes, perfect. Thank you. So this is the Vancouver Clinic. It's a 2-story, 30,000 square foot medical office building located in Camas, Washington. Altogether, there's about 33 different exam rooms within this clinic, and the clinic hosts urgent care, family medicine, and ophthalmology, which are all supported by phlebotomy and radiology. This project was completed in October of last year, 2020, ahead of schedule and under budget. And it's just a really unique site. It was built in this old quarry. And that's kind of the project that we're going to be talking about today.
Great. Thank you, Kurt. All right. Well, let's get started with our panel discussion. So to start off, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the roles that a general contractor and an architect play on a project, but some of you may or may not have had the opportunity to work with an owner representative before. And so I was going to ask Kathy if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about what is an owner representative, what do they do, and how does that support the project?
Thank you, Sean. Happy to talk. Excuse me. Owners reps are hired when owners lack the bandwidth and or the experience to take on a large capital improvement project. We serve as the owner, we serve as an advisor to the executive levels, as well as bandwidth, an extension of the facilities team. And we coordinate all of the owner procured items such as furniture, fixtures, equipment, medical equipment in the case of this clinic, as well as consultants. We coordinate the owner's consultants such as commissioning, special testing and inspections, hazardous material removal, abatement, all sorts of good stuff. And we also set the tone for this project. I think as the owner's representative, we have the opportunity of creating where we're all starting and how we all work together. Also, I want to just make an adjunct. We have all been working together for about 3 to 4 years on the Vancouver Clinic, and we may accidentally say TVC. That is our acronym for that. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Kathy, for that, that jumping point for our panel discussion today. Next, I'm wondering if Malcolm, if you wouldn't mind talking about the kind of the origination of the project and how the project began. Architects usually lead the initial phases of a project with concept planning and whatnot. So can you share with our audience a little bit about how this project got started and how that related to kind of the germination of the team culture?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Sean. The project started in 2016. We interviewed for the project at the end of 2016, and it was originally envisioned as being a full design build delivery approach. But shortly after the project was awarded, we went to a traditional contract with the owner. And rather than having it be design build with Anderson, Anderson was maintained a role on the team as design assist for construction issues, cost estimating, and project scheduling. So at that time, we were contracted to design these 3 projects simultaneously. So we had the Ridgefield project, which opened, gosh, it must have been 2019? 2019, it was about a 15,000 square foot project, simultaneously designing the project we're discussing today, Columbia Palisades, which is about 30,000 square feet, as Kurt mentioned. And then shortly we'll be starting the next project, constructing the next project on their property in Salmon Creek. It's about 80,000 square feet. So these 3 projects launched simultaneously, and I think thankfully, shortly after that, they started to separate on the schedule so that we started looking at these one at a time. But through schematic design, we were doing them simultaneously. The owner wanted us to be very integrated into their operational planning. So they asked us to use a lean principled integrated design event strategy for designing the projects. And so this involved creating cross-functional teams, clinicians, leadership, engineers, facilities folks, so that we were looking for ways to improve the way that the operations worked and design a building or buildings that supported that. So the owner at that time leased a space in Vancouver, a warehouse space in Vancouver, very large warehouse space in Vancouver, for us to conduct these integrated design events. And this included tabletop exercises with the teams to help with the planning. It included full cardboard mock-ups that our friends at Anderson helped us put together. And then traditional pinup work and presentations as well. So during these events, we would move the panels around and help them simulate workflows through the plans, through the mock-up. We would time them. We would find different ways to improve patient throughput, and then use the mock-up during design development to do the same kind of testing and simulation for the room fit-outs, so that it was across the continuum of the design. So once we had established the scope and the costs with Anderson's help, and DayCPM again embedded in this process and helping us coordinate with the owner and bring their expertise, we were ready to launch into CDs. And at that point, construction documents, we went back to the design build model with Anderson, and through that process, it carried on through construction documents and CA with Anderson and their trade partners, the trade partners becoming the engineers of record. And that takes us to today.
Thank you, Malcolm. Darren, I'm wondering if you can talk about that transition into the collaborative design build, where we took the plans from the design development phase through CDs into the GMP and construction phase. How did that build upon the foundation that was laid during the team's involvement with design and ZGF? How did that continue to lay the foundation for continued teamwork? And can you also speak to some of the investments that we made during that process in our team culture?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Sean. Yeah, so like Malcolm said, that Anderson, ZGF, DayCPM were brought on really early in this process. The project we're talking about today is the second, but this culture was developed from the very start. It was developed very early, and we had identified clear roles and responsibilities amongst the team. Most of the time there's the lines of architect, contractor, and so forth, but we defined those kind of in a different way. We established a relationship of trust, and we had great communication amongst the team because we had been on the project for so long. We took like Malcolm said, we had a lot of integrated design events, but we also did some team building events. So we got to know kind of everyone personally and know where everybody was coming from, and kind of develop the relationship and the culture that everybody's pulling in the same direction for the ultimate goal is to build the project for the Vancouver clinic.
That's great. Kathy, I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about the investment in Strengths Finders as a tool and how that served the team throughout the expansion projects.
Sure. We, DCPM started out with Strengths Finders, which focuses on everyone's top 5 strengths that they just do naturally. It's different than the DISC profile. And we wanted to bring that into the team. So we asked everyone to take the test results and then collaborated on how we all fit together, how we all integrated. And it was really interesting to, when you focus on what everyone does, then you can leverage all of that for the greater good and for the benefit of the entire team. So we all, at the Ridgefield Clinic, we had a project where we talked about seeing each other's strengths and how they showed up in the working relationship we'd already had to date. And then when we came to the Camas Columbia Palisades project that we're talking about today, we had new team members such as Kurt joining us. And we wanted to make sure that we took that and then took it up another notch. So in this case, we each put on stickies what we individually wanted to have out of this project, what we wanted this project at the end to feel like. And then Sean helped facilitate it and we consolidated those. And it turned out that every one of us wanted the same thing. We wanted to have a really high functioning team that worked well together. So we weren't walking into each other, we were just flowing. And we also wanted to have strong relationships. And at the end, when you think of a podium, we all wanted to stand on the top as first place with TVC with this project. So I really felt like that was strong. And it made my heart sing when I walked into the job site. I didn't walk in, I opened the door because it's COVID. But at the end of the job and saw this coat of arms, which is what we created with these images that speak to this. And so every day, Anderson Construction and their team showed up and saw this as their kind of our vision as a company, as a team, I should say, not a company.
That's awesome, Kathy. Thank you. Let's transition now to talk a little bit from the team's perspective about how the owner rep sets a tone for the project. And we've all worked in different kinds of projects. How specifically would you say that the CPM influenced the culture of the project, and what benefits did that have? Malcolm, I'm wondering if you could speak to that for starters.
Sure, I'll add a thought there. Typically, at least in my experience and my colleagues' experience, we work with clients that have their own design and construction department that has been around for a long time, and it's part of their culture. So working with DCPM and working on these projects specifically with a third party for that matter was a very interesting experience, a fresh set of eyes. It was a fresh way to have the teaming occur because there was not that sort of institutional history going on. It was a new approach and a new way to integrate a team with that level of expertise brought in, as we were all new. So we all grew together as a team.
Thank you. Darren, did you have some thoughts that you wanted to share as well?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Oh, what Malcolm said was great. And what I want to kind of boil it down to is what DCPM brought to the team was, transparency and no ego. I mean, like I said before, everybody's kind of in their silos of architects, the construction team, the engineers and everything, but it kind of separated that siloed that typically happens. Everybody's working towards the same goal. Like I said before, we had clear, chains of communication. Everybody had an established timeline when decisions needed to be made. For example, the trust is, we had some issues with some lateral bracing and how it tied in on the structural steel. Justin just picks up the phone, calls, the structural engineer, gets things started, just lets Kurt know with ZGF that, hey, we've got this going, we've got a fix, we've got a plan, our steel erector's got, this already in the works, and then we just pick up the phone and call Kathy and say, hey, just to let you know, we're going to be talking about this in the owners meeting that, we've had an issue, we've got a plan, we've got a workaround, we've got a fix. So, and then another thing is what, Sean and Kathy always talked about is how they wanted to clear the obstacles for the team, whether it was, the owner and, getting their equipment to deliver to the site, or they needed ZGF needed a design decision on some interior colors or finishes or whatever, it's how could they, as in the owner's representative, pull that obstacle away and get the decision made and quickly. So
thank you very much. Kathy, I'm wondering if you can talk about the opportunities that you have as an owner's rep, not just to provide servant leadership for your client, but how does that play out with the team, and why is that important?
When I think about how we all work together, when we have seen each other's strengths and we've seen each other work and we honor how each of us show up and how we contribute, it creates so much transparency. And I think Justin's used the word vulnerability in the past. When you see each other and you allow each other to process, it creates this safety that allows everyone to bring their best game and to get the best ideas. Whenever we have an issue that came up, it didn't matter where you were in the project, what your role was. Everyone can contribute, or you didn't have to. There was no ego. It didn't feel like someone had to show up with a cape and say, I've got the answer. It was just so, it just felt like we're all pulling together. Did that answer your question, Sean, or did I miss it?
Absolutely. No, I think that was great. I'd like to transition now to the context of how COVID began to create impacts for our project. And there are some specific ways that it did. And Justin, I'm wondering if you could share with our audience at what point COVID landed in the terms of our project schedule, and how did that begin to alter construction conditions and some of the challenges that you began to grapple with?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how any of us could have expected this to happen, but when we started off, we were about 5-6 months into the project, which we were close to our peak in crew size on the project. And all of a sudden we have to figure out all these logistical nightmares of how do we get every single person tested prior to walking on the job site. So we jumped into action. We built a shed of sorts for a medical assistant to help do our temperature checks every morning, and a questionnaire. We got wristbands. We staggered shifts a little bit so that we didn't have people standing in long lines. But I think the culture, going back to that culture that we established at Ridgefield and the strength finders and the team collaboration, that trickled down into our subcontractors as well, and the relationship that Anderson had with our subs. So everybody was really positive about it. I mean, as positive as we could be about it. I think everybody felt a sense of gratefulness that we were working, that we were considered essential, and we were able to continue working. So we kind of, kept that in a positive light. But I think we all just felt supported and like we were doing this for a bigger cause, especially working on a medical clinic that will be seeing patients with COVID. So we just all dug in, and it was pretty wild though, in terms of how the details of what we do in construction had to change when we had to socially distance and wear masks along with our safety glasses, and we had fogging issues. And we always talk about, when you're lifting heavy stuff, get help. A lot of the means and methods we do in construction are close and working with other people, and now we had to separate that. So we had to all put on our thinking caps and really work together.
It was pretty seamless too. As an outside contractor that does site visits and everything, I just showed up and all of a sudden, boom, I had to get my temperature checked and questionnaires. And just looking back, I wish I had that on some sites right now, It's
a great point, John. Thank you, Justin, for that context. Kurt, your role on the project was both in design, and then for the campus expansion, you played a role in construction administration. So can you share with our audience a little bit about when COVID landed, what things did the team begin to do to ideate around using the tools that we were already available to us to manage the different scopes of work that we were each responsible for?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it was about in March of 2020 when we first started to realize the impacts of COVID. We kind of met as a team and started to talk about how could we best support Anderson from a QA/QC perspective, as well as from a construction administration perspective. And what things could we do that we were currently doing on site could be done remotely. And what we found out was that about 80% of the things that we were doing could be done remotely. We were very fortunate that we already had several digital tools in play at the beginning of construction. So for instance, we were using Procore, which is an online database. It's for documenting. It's pretty much where we could track tasks, photograph current construction projects or details, upload submittals and RFIs. And the good thing with Procore is that everybody on the team had access to it. So the owner's rep had access, Anderson had access, and then the architects had access. So we all were kind of seeing the same thing. There's a very high level of transparency. We were also taking monthly drone videos. So we had a drone kind of circling the site every month. And I think initially it was just to kind of track the progress of it, and it was also kind of fun to see. But then once COVID hit, it turned into like an actual documentation tool. So I started like zooming into the drone footage and kind of analyzing the construction or certain RFIs that I was handling. You know, we were already photographing the site, or Anderson was photographing the site every day. But I think once COVID hit and I wasn't going to the site in person anymore, whenever there was a question about design intent or like a request for more information about a detail, it became more of just like a personal interaction rather than just filing like an RFI through a form. It just became like a phone call or like a video chat at the site, because I couldn't be at the site of the specific detail, and they could show me right there via video, where they could take extra pictures and send me those pictures of the site to kind of really talk about how I want that specific connection to flow and work. And it just felt a lot more personable, but it was also a lot more efficient because we got things done pretty quickly, because there wasn't handling all this paperwork. It was just like a video chat and I could see it. I didn't have to drive out to the site. So I think there's a lot of things that we learned during the process that are actually more efficient than how we were doing it before. I also found out that like different applications like Enscape through Revit, which is like a rendering tool, became very effective. So usually as an architect, we'll render things during the design process, but I found rendering, especially the quick renders that can come from modern Enscape applications, are very, like, they're really handy in terms of design communication. And like, this is the design intent, you know, maybe we have to zoom in and make the detail of that, but like to have that communication back and forth with Anderson, I think those tools that we were already having in play, just using them more, kind of came into effect when COVID hit.
Sean, real quick, one thing that I just wanted to bring up too is the city of Vancouver was our governing agency. ZGF, you know, built packages, design packages that were very, you know, robust, submitting it through the e-plan system and so forth. So when before COVID come out, the inspectors were very comfortable with the design. They'd come out and look at you know, what was being installed. Justin and the team and the crews, you know, developed that trust with the inspectors. So when it came to COVID, basically they had to go to an online system too. I mean, I remember our project engineer Ian was doing FaceTime inspections with the city inspector, you know, showing them, hey, we're covering this wall, and basically signing it off via FaceTime.
Yeah, there was lots of ways, Darren, where I remember the team just went to great lengths to serve each other and to empower each other in scope. Like Kurt, I remember you sharing a story about how materials for approval were delivered to your house and you laid it out on the sidewalk. I remember Ian was our project engineer on the site, and Kathy would frequently be calling up Ian and he'd run out and take videos for the team. So there's a lot of ways where this spirit of teamwork delivered real results for each member of the team time and time again. And there was a real reciprocal quality to that. When I think of that, Kathy, that quality wasn't just existing in the team, but there were ways that we had opportunities to do that with our client as well, because they were being impacted by COVID. So would you be able to share a little bit from your perspective about how you saw COVID beginning to impact our client, and then what kinds of ways were we able to support them during that time to help them through that phase of the project and support things continuing to move forward?
Sure, Sean. As you can imagine with COVID, when COVID hit, Vancouver Clinic was super, super busy setting up testing stations and new patient protocols from check-in through check-out. And they're also retrofitting existing clinics to allow for some negative pressurization in at least one room in existing clinics. So they were completely busy 7 days a week. We were lucky because we had had the Ridgefield experience. So we already knew what were their hot issues, who needed to see what, when we needed to fold people in, and when we can just run. And so we became very streamlined in terms of when we engage with TVC, come in for a few minutes, ask a few questions, walk out. And then when the facilities team toured in August, it was fantastic because they were walking around and their lead facilities director, he goes, wow, you guys did great. We were so busy. We didn't even have time to look at this and you handled it all. I mean, there were things that we came back and did. And actually that reminds me of something, Sean, is the one change order that we had that came from the owner on this project was to add negative pressurization rooms into this facility during construction. And that was actually another sign of our teamwork. We got this inquiry from TVC asking if we could do it, what it would take. And it was just impressive watching how everyone stepped up to try to figure out how to do this. And then Justin and his team executed. And I think we haven't spoken enough about how much Justin and Ian, the project engineer, were basically an island on this site, taking care of everything. And we were electronically connected.
Yeah, I want to come back to that because I think that was a key thing. And Darren, I'm going to have you address that in just a moment. Kathy, there were some other items that came up in our support of TVC. Specifically, there was a lot of work that was still required from them around operational readiness. You know, everything from mailboxes to IT and everything. Can you share a little bit more about some of the ways we were able to support them with a more virtual work habit?
Thank you for the cue. During the Ridgefield project, TVC managed all of their different components and interests, whether it was propagating glove containers or IT connections or deliveries or mailboxes. And this was all handled on an Excel spreadsheet that was manually updated, manually sent out. And obviously in this setting, and they were all meeting in person, obviously I shouldn't say obviously, during Ridgefield. When it came to Camas and we were in the COVID conditions, we were trying to find ways to help them streamline that exercise. So we ended up using a virtual platform of Smartsheet, and then everyone could be prompted to update on the things that they were responsible for, and then it would automatically be accessible for everyone. So we helped them with that, as well as with medical equipment, Sean. With most clinics, you try to get the equipment to arrive just when it's going to be installed. So you don't have a lot of storage issues. It's not in the way of construction. In this case, because we were concerned about lead times with COVID, we actually we advocated and helped procure equipment ahead of time and then stored it off-site to make sure that TVC could open on time.
That's really great. And supply chain issues continue to be something that we all monitor, whether it's construction related or medical equipment, given demand and shipping issues. That kind of takes me to my next question for you, Darren. You know, there was a lot of ways where, as Kathy really kind of used the metaphor, the construction site became an island. Can you talk a little bit about how planning and construction and support to that team began to change, and anything you want to share about how the team rallied under those conditions?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Sean. I mean, we said left on an island, we can call it left on a rock because we were building in an old rock quarry, but we'll tie this back to strength finders that DCPM led us through. I'm going to kind of talk about leaving Justin out on this rock, or Justin, our project engineer, and the team Justin leads with harmony. He engages all the subcontractors in scheduling and pull planning and safety and so forth. He's not an adversarial type superintendent. He doesn't bark orders. He likes to coordinate the trades and allow them to kind of work out who's going first in which area, but still meet the obligations of the contract schedule. He's all about clearing the obstacles, and what we ended up having to do is kind of leave him out there on the rock and support him and the team so we could socially distance and not have as many people in the trailer because we had such a small trailer. But I know that we were all there, and you know, Kathy was there to, you know, answer the phone and answer an email, and same with Kurt and Malcolm and the team at ZGF. So, I mean, maybe Justin, maybe you can talk about some of the, you know, the losses in your coordination of the field trades.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was tough. We went from a small staff to a really small staff out on the site, which makes your day-to-day, you know, the just things we don't think about, opening up the gate, locking the gate, kind of just one or two people's burden. But at the same time, you know, I remember a time when Kathy called me up and said, find out what your crew wants for lunch. I'm bringing you lunch. And so the morale and the level of, you know, and she said, I'm not staying. I just want to drop it off and you guys eat and just let you know that we care and we're here. And so, I mean, I don't know, honestly, how we would have done that without that level of support from the outside. You know, we went to teams meetings in the morning for daily huddles so that our team was in the loop and hearing our daily, you know, I called it, you know, COVID exhaustion. You know, we just, after a while, we just started becoming exhausted. And so daily meetings were good to just vent a little bit to the team and be able to, you know, get some of that stuff out. But at the same time, you know, we did have a small trailer, well, at least small for COVID. So when we were doing our poll planning and morning huddles in that trailer originally, you know, that got shut down right away. So we ended up having to get creative and, you know, get in smaller groups with each subcontractor, kind of do our own planning. And then I was kind of the, you know, the mediator that was able to bring those questions or concerns or objects in the way of them doing their work and bring them to all the players. And we just had to do them in smaller groups, you know. Monday morning safety meetings are always really important to get communication out to everybody, every single trade person on the job. And we weren't able to do that. We couldn't meet in groups larger than 10 people. And we would have 70 to 80 people on the job site. So what we did is the week before we would send out a kind of a standard safety meeting that was discussing the work that was coming up that next week, and everybody could communicate that within their own groups. And then, you know, we collect the documentation and make sure we have that on file, but we were able to still communicate just in a little bit different way. It wasn't as good. I would much rather meet in person and have that, but we had to make it work. So yeah, that was tough with the poll planning. Again, it's kind of like all the things that we promote that we want to be doing. We weren't able to do those things the same way anymore. So we had to get creative.
Luckily, there was, for our coordination meetings for startup, though, most of us knew each other from the previous project. And so it was pretty seamless when we were doing coordination meetings for startup. And then when it came to that critical time between a startup and operation and testing of that equipment.
Thanks, John. And thank you, Justin. It sounds like from the Cliff Notes, if I'm reading the Cliff Notes here, there's lots of impact where, because of the inability to meet in large groups, there was a lot more that was required of you and Ian to make sure that silos weren't occurring on the job site and keeping everybody in step, whereas that was a lot easier to do when there was not those restrictions on group work, group seeing, group visibility with your poll planning processes. I'm wondering now if, Kathy, you might be able to talk about and introduce John's role on the project. And we specifically and very intentionally worked with commissioning on this project. Can you share about the value that had to the project? And John, I'll have a question for you once Kathy's had a chance to introduce you and your role.
Sure, Sean. First of all, the Washington State Department of Energy requires commissioning on projects to ensure that they have been installed and have been calibrated and balanced to meet basic energy requirements as well as the base design. So we were reaching out, we actually sought procurement for commissioning, and I got to meet John and his team at Northwest NWSI. I always get tangled there. And it was really wonderful because John brings a wealth of experience, having commissioned so many projects around the Northwest. And bringing that information, I can come to, when I first contacted him, I said, what else do I want in this proposal? What else do I want to ask for that would bring value for Vancouver Clinic? And John was super resourceful when it came to that.
That's great.
Yeah. What was great though, I wasn't part of that Strength Finders, part of that team that early, but one of the first things Kathy asked me was, what do you need to succeed on this project? And I really, it gave me a chance to open up to her about the need for her to back me up when it came to specific items if I ran into some hurdles, and then the necessary relationship with the GC, you know, and so the Ridgefield project went incredibly smooth, and then that transferred into the Camas project here. What's funny is that some of the challenges for commissioning, I end up being a hurdle in itself to the project team, or can be, you know, commissioning can. Some people see me as somebody who's paid by the owner and trying to find problems and point out who did what wrong. And that's not effective commissioning. And luckily for me, this project team, I didn't feel like that role was already defined for me. I came in and I already felt like part of the team because I've actually known Darren since 2008 on my very first project. I've worked with Justin before. I've worked with ZGF, well, not Kurt and Malcolm straight, you know, one-on-one. It was one of those situations where I was able to step into a role where I was the most effective. I can get away from my main hurdle of communication and, you know, effectively getting the information I need and making sure that I can focus then straight on doing what I'm good at, which is coordinating, you know, MEP controls and some of the subsystems like fire alarm, and also, you know, literally problem solving like that. I'm paid by the owner to help people problem solve while people are mobilized on site. And I have a responsibility to the project team too. Like, I need to be timely. I need to also leave my ego to the side. And I'm literally trying to help everybody finish their scope of work as effectively as possible when you can actually fix stuff, you know? And so when I started communicating with Justin, you know, on our first project, on the Ridgefield project, he was just like, you know, basically go at it, you know, I'll support you. And the coordination meetings were just, it made it so easy. It was sort of scary because you could get things done. We came in, a third of our budget hours weren't even used on the first project. And then on this project for the Camas, we were able to meet some of those changes in designs, not at any cost. And even with the extra trips to site that we had to make because of some manufacturer problems with the RTUs, it was great. You know, I could have a fire marshal that's supposed to show up in a few hours and find out a duct detector is not shutting down a piece of equipment up on a roof, work with the electrical contractor and the fire alarm contractor, call up Justin down below and say, hey, something's wrong, or we're about to fix it in the next 2 hours, you know, focus on other stuff, tell the fire marshal, and we'll have it ready, you know. And it was just one of those seamless transitions to where I was a team player and they saw me as a team player as well.
John, your comment speaks to the fact that I feel like we always have been pulling together. No one has come in and pulled us to the side or not got on the bus. We've been all pulling together, and I just really have enjoyed and appreciated that. What you speak to in terms of how much you saved at Ridgefield and what you were able to accomplish at Camas speaks to the efficiency that comes from a solid team that's built on trust and transparency and respect. I just feel like there's nothing we couldn't do. Bring it.
It was good.
That's great. I love hearing these stories. They never get old to me about how there was a lack of protectionism on the team when it came to various scopes of work. And in my mind, that is some of the greatest value that we can bring to an owner. Is there's a significant investment that goes into healthcare construction or construction of any kind. And each one of us has a broad range of expertise and value that we have the potential to bring. And so when there is this kind of collaborative spirit in a team, the owner has the best potential to reap from all of those benefits. So thank you, team, for your work on the project. We're turning a bit of a corner now on our panel discussion, but before we get to the Q&A time for our audience, I wanted to just ask, I think there's a lot of questions that people might have around, if I'm getting ready to start a project, or if I'm thinking about starting a project during COVID, or maybe we're already in a project, whether you're an owner or a tradesperson that's engaged in this, if you could give them advice on something that you would recommend that had positive dividends, what would you share with them? And I'd like to start with Malcolm.
Thanks, Sean. I would say that it's so important to always be working towards fostering an environment of trust and transparency and respect. The benefits of that are, you never know how important that's going to be later on. And this is a great example of that. I hope everybody can see that, just the way this team interacts. We didn't know this was going to happen, but the benefits are certainly there by setting that foundation. So I'd say that would be very important.
Okay. John, how about for you? What advice would you give to our audience?
I mean, for me, it always comes down to bringing in some of those outside consultants' expertise and really making sure that they come in and are brought in on the team and supported, because then you get the most out of them. So for somebody in my experience, I do at least 12 projects or more a year, and so I see a lot of issues, and that's what I try to bring to the table to try to help problem solve on that side. So definitely leverage your sub-consultants where you can, and make sure that they're brought in and given the information they need to stay tuned in on the project.
That's great. Darren, what comes to your mind when you think about advice for our audience?
I mean, it goes along with what Malcolm said of, building a team with, respect, transparency, and trust. And what that means is you're going to have to potentially spend some money up front. There's that front end investment to get the team on board early. Probably, maybe it's an investment that you're not, comfortable making, but put it into perspective is that investment was done up front. We finished both the first two projects, the Ridgefield and the Columbia Palisades or Camas project ahead of schedule. I think we were 3 weeks ahead on Camas. We were 4 weeks ahead on Ridgefield, and we were under budget on the construction side. I know Kathy or Sean could put it into perspective on the overall project because they managed the owner side. But I think being willing to put up that upfront investment is going to pay on the back end.
I'll be happy to address that, Darren, for that data. You're right. That front-end investment does pay dividends, and it pays dividends in a number of ways. Ridgefield was 3 weeks early and $3 million under total project budget. Camas was 5 weeks early, despite COVID, and $4.6 million under total project budget, which is fantastic. But even more than that, I think the testament to early investment, and this really kind of goes back to the work that Malcolm and his team did with the owner and design. We had no owner-sponsored change orders for either of those projects, which is, I think, unique in project management. The only exception to that was the negative pressurization rooms, which Anderson was able to cover in the design build contingency. So thank you. It was a huge win, but you can't underestimate the importance of early involvement. Justin, how about for you? What comes to your mind about advice for our audience?
I would say, in my opinion, morale. Check the morale of the site, of the team, and if it's low, address it. Don't just keep powering through. get back to, there's just so much production safety, quality in having good morale. So pay attention to it.
What specific things did you guys do or to keep morale high, out of curiosity?
Well, I think a lot of it is, you know, the support from the top down to me in the field gave me that freedom to support the field, and actually telling people when they're doing a great job and not just when they're doing something wrong is a big deal. Cleaning, you know, we upped our cleanings in our facilities to twice a week, and we added more porta potties so that when somebody came onto a job site, they felt that we were protecting them. We added wash station with foot pedals that we had our plumber put together and set it all up to where, you know, everybody felt safe to come onto the job site to work, and they felt encouraged, and it just, you know, even with the COVID exhaustion, we were able to, you know, push through and work as a team. So
that's great. Those are some really good practical examples. Kurt, let's go to you next, and then we'll finish up with Kathy.
I think for me, communication was key for this project. And so I think finding the right communication tools and styles really helped us kind of carry that design intent to Anderson. So for us, it was diagramming through Adobe Illustrator, it was rendering through Revit and Inkscape, it was documenting everything on Procore, it was having drone footage and photography at the site. So whether it's digital tools or just the kind of communication method of them coming to my house and dropping off samples, I think you kind of got to feel out what's the most efficient way for your project.
Great. Thank you. And Kathy, how about for you?
Oh my gosh, I love all these answers. I actually want to say them all again. I love the trust and transparency. I love the safety that we all built, because when you have a team of safety, then everyone participates, everyone contributes, and everyone's engaged. And I think that that also affects how we all produce. I think that I'm just going to choose respect begets respect. When you treat everyone on the site, I know Justin does this naturally as a superintendent. We've engaged, I know in this project we had engaged different people at different times, and it just was so awesome to have everyone's contributions. They felt heard, they felt seen, they felt valued, and they are.
Yeah, great. Thank you, team, for sharing about our journey on this project. I'm going to turn things back over to Megan now to maybe share some of the questions that have come up from our audience. And Megan, if you can ask the question, and then I'll tee it up to a team member who I think might be best able to answer that question.
Perfect. Sounds good. And just to let everyone watching know, you can still put those in, so we've got time. So from Jewel, we've got hindsight is always 20/20, pun intended. If you could start over from scratch, is there anything you would have done differently?
Justin, I'm going to let you kick that one off.
Well, so to answer that, we are doing it again. We're getting ready to start the third project, and we are doing things differently from a field side. Again, that's where I live. So we're creating a covered area, large meeting area that's covered so that we could do our outside pole planning. I realized the importance of, more than I ever have before, the importance of the group meetings and the morning, Monday morning safety meetings. And after a while, they feel, you know, like they just happened, but the importance of the information getting out to every single worker so that they know what's going on the job site, they know where the hazards are going to be, and where the access points are. So yeah, we're building some different things in place on the next job, and I guess that's probably the biggest one there. We're also building out the inside of our trailers into like little COVID work pods. We're in a phase up here in Washington right now where if you have a door closed, you're able to take off your mask. So instead of working all day in an office with your mask, we're going to build little bubbles that we're working in. So just different things like that. And I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and I might actually tack on a little bit, because I have a thought about that question too from the owner's rep perspective. there's a value in a whole lot of counselors. So really invest the time to explore what risks may show up with the project, ensure your contingencies are appropriate, and work with your GC and your team members to understand and to create transparency for your owners about what project costs are specific to COVID related things, because a lot of times they just kind of melt together in a big bucket of construction costs, and it's really helpful when we can kind of delineate, these are the things that we're doing to create safety. And especially I know in healthcare projects, our healthcare clients really care about keeping things safe while we're doing work. So anything else anybody wants to share in hindsight? Malcolm.
Just one quick thought. The importance of having a really good onboarding process for people, recognizing that in the COVID environment, the onboarding process is virtual most of the time. So having something ready to share as people come on board so that they'll get up to speed quickly.
Yeah, and then for me, it comes down to some of the tasks that come at the end of the project when you have those inspectors coming in, to get a lot more pre-testing done, so to avoid those huge groups at the end of the project. Looking at the fire alarm panel and doing a lot of those activities where it's normally like 8 guys in a really small room, and being conscious about pre-testing to minimize that size of a group.
Yeah, I would agree. One other quick thing that comes to mind, and I'll circle back to you, Megan, is our jurisdictions are partners in this work too. And they are also under duress, trying to manage the affairs that they are responsible for. The same with utilities. So engage early and often to make sure that everybody's moving in time so that projects can complete and be opened on time. Megan, is there another question that we can answer?
Yep, we have one final question from Dan. It says, in regard to the strength assessment, wondering how often you all referred back to that document to keep the focus.
I think I can take that one. I mean, Sean and Kathy did a phenomenal job, laying out the strength finders, going through some exercises on the Ridgefield job. We had, each person had a little sticky pad, and then there were sticky notes written by the other team members. Those just went right on the wall. So we got to see the strengths and how everybody's communication skills and stuff that was on the wall. We got to see it every owners meeting. We had some team lunches. We had ugly sweater, days, and Ian, who is our project engineer, one of the strengths is woo. I mean, he's all about being the guy, and he's a young kid, but I mean, his gift from one of the DCPM was, it said on the side, woo. And then in transitioning that into the Columbia Palisades, like Kathy said, the coat of arms was on the door. It was the work we did, Sean facilitated it, but it was like, it was there every meeting. We all got to see it, from all the team members.
And for a long time, you had the Ridgefield kind of legacy up on the wall too. Since we had a lot of the same people, I could look up and see, we had our owners had also done the Strengths Finders assessment. So we had that information as well, so we can integrate with them.
Yeah, one thing that was a benefit is we just rolled the construction trailer right from Ridgefield over to Canvas. So all that stuff was already on the wall.
Does that mean you're keeping the coat of arms for the next project?
Yes, it's in the Connex, yes.
That's great.
I mean, I would say too, just one more quick comment on that. I would say that we got to know each other so well that we didn't really have to revisit it as much as we just like knew each other. And we we laughed about it sometimes, right? With like our project engineer who was woo, we just made light of some of it, but at the same time, really got to know each other.
I think we appreciated those qualities because our woo project engineer was the one that lit the virtual fireplace during some of our early OAC meetings before COVID. And, everyone brought their special sauce to it that we all appreciated. And it was really nice to focus on the good that we all can do to pull together.
Absolutely. Any other final comments, team, or any other questions? All right, well, it has been an absolute pleasure to spend some time with you this afternoon. To all of our ISHE members and maybe other chapter members who've joined today. Audience members, thank you for joining us, for your investment time. And Megan and Curtis, thank you so much for giving us the chance to engage with your community. If there's any questions that any of us might be able to answer for any of you, I know our contact information will be shared afterwards, and we'd love to be of assistance.
Yep. Thank you all for some great information. It seems like everybody enjoyed it, so we appreciate it.
Thank you.